it is to be raised Unitarian and also continue as an adult, each of us have our own unique experience. And although UU churches probably have something in common, they're very different as well. My family started attending when I was 5 years old, so I've been a Unitarian for almost 60 years. I grew up mostly in the Meadville, Pennsylvania UU church. Meadville Lombard UU Theological Seminary started there, but it has since moved to Chicago. I have good memories of growing up in the Unitarian church. I think we mostly studied other religions and the history of UU, but I don't remember it all. I was more interested in the social aspects. I was involved in LRY, Liberal Religious Youth, which is now called YRUU. I took one of the first AYS classes about your sexuality, which was groundbreaking at the time. I remember I asked some embarrassing questions. I have good memories of sleep-ins at the church. My favorite place was under the grand piano. We also went on an outward-bound camping trip in the Allegheny Mountains. I remember the church ran a food co-op in the basement that was open during the week, and my mom used to volunteer there, and I would go there. And I think they had things in bulk, and you would put them in a bag or something and, save money, and they were organic. So all the kids in my age group had dropped out by the time I was a teenager. So I ended up taking a job in the church nursery, and I was also the volunteer church librarian. I would go there after school and read and work in the library. We had a full-time secretary back then who ran off with the janitor named Harmony, but that's another story. I think they took some things with them that didn't belong to them. It wasn't always easy being raised UU. I was an older child when I first heard of such things like the virgin birth and other miracles. I did not believe them, and I said so. Adults in my life thought I was being precocious, and I was, but not on purpose like they thought. Still, as an adult, I feel like I'm missing a big chunk of common knowledge that majority of the people in this country have. I definitely miss a lot of biblical references. Being raised UU can make you feel like you don't fit in. Other people either don't know what it is, which is sometimes good, they don't like what it is, or worse, they try to save you. My two brothers and my daughter were also raised in a UU church, but none of them continued as adults. They have mostly remained unchurched, but have occasionally gotten married in the church. I would say they're all fairly liberal thinkers and have studied other religions. Other friends I had from growing up in the church also did not go on to be very involved. Why that is sounds like an interesting topic for another day. As an adult, I was a member of Nacogdoches UU, which is now part of Lufkin. I was at First Jefferson UU in Fort Worth for 10 years. I was a Sunday school teacher. I'm the leader of the young adult group. I was at Thoreau Woods UU in Huntsville 27 years, where I was secretary, vice president, program chair, webmaster, newsletter editor, nursery director, and ran Thoreau Woods Coffee House, but thank goodness not all at the same time. It felt like it sometimes. I have attended a few General Assemblies, women's conferences, and I attended the Dwight Brown Leadership Experience in 2010, best class ever. Do I have any other alums here? Anybody been to that? I consider myself a devout UU, which is not something you hear a lot. To me, it means I'm devoted to living my life in accordance with our principles and to support my church and the denomination. I'd like to say, as an agnostic, I'm open to being wrong on what I don't believe, but sometimes that's not the case. And sometimes I have used my difficulty of naming or committing to my belief system as a shield to avoid examining my own spiritual beliefs. When I took Building Your Own Theology course at a UU church in my 20s, we studied different religions, and I liked certain parts of most religions, but couldn't wholeheartedly support just one. A few years ago, I took a quiz about spiritual beliefs on BeliefNet, and it said I agreed with UU 100%. Secular humanist 90%, liberal Quaker 85%, and New Age 70%. So I believe that going into social work was a spiritual calling stemming from my beliefs. I also take an eclectic counseling approach, studying and practicing different theories but not committing to any single one. And I'd like to finish by reading a short article written by Laura Peterson about her UU childhood, because it really did kind of relate to it, and it's also kind of funny. So she says, I've often heard, your folks must have been hippies. Only my parents were anything but hippies. They came of age in northeastern working class families during the 40s and 50s, and they never used any recreational drugs. The hippie confusion about my family probably resulted because we were out of the closet Unitarian Universalists. In short, UUs believe there's truth to be found in all religions, but no one religion holds all the truth. On any Sunday morning, you're most likely to encounter dialectic, agnostic, social activists waving petitions and sign-up sheets to tighten DUI sentencing laws, operate food drives, and fight global warming. It says you won't, however, find any Bibles in the chapel. Maybe in the library, right? But that doesn't mean you can't bring one, or the Torah, or a cookbook. Another way of attempting to sum up UUism is to say that it's Emersonian. Ralph Waldo Emerson was a Unitarian minister with a strong inclination towards self-determination and personal responsibility. If we wear a t-shirt that says WWJD, it probably means, what would Jefferson do? Our emphasis is on deeds, not creeds. Noisy Quakers is another popular definition. The basic difference between UUs and pacifist Quakers is we believe that on occasion, arms must be taken up to discourage more megalomaniacal and murderous people in our species. Some early Americans, based on their beliefs and activities, were tagged borderline UUs. These included Benjamin Franklin, Walt Whitman, and Emily Dickinson. As a child, I assumed this was like being borderline schizophrenic. It's natural to want to take pride in a religion that, while representing less than 1% of the population, claims several signers of the Declaration of Independence and 5 presidents. However, it's also necessary to point out the flip side. As the Reverend Dr. Forrest Church said, the architect of the Titanic was a Unitarian. And so was the captain. It says, and Nearer My God to Thee, the hymn played while the Titanic went down, was also written by a Unitarian, our very own Trinity of Disaster. People don't really become UUs or convert to UUism or accept UUism as their personal savior, unless they're drowning during a failed Greenpeace mission. So much as one day they just discover that they're UU, have been all along, find there's a name and a place for it, possibly like discovering that one is gay or has a natural aptitude for clog dancing. So we're going to hear from 4 others since I just recently found out that our new member Marie Kenner's also raised UU. So, but next we have Susan Baker.
She's rather a hard act to follow. Well, mine's not going to be amusing at all. I was born in Houston in 1949. My father was in law school, and my mother was raising 4 children born in 47, 48, 49, 50. We did not go to church that I recall, but we moved to Galveston when I was 4. And my oldest memory is meeting in the YWCA. Okay, I was raised in this fellowship, okay, was this group, none of the rest of y'all anyway, just me, met at the YWCA. And my oldest memory of meeting there was we actually did a Christmas pageant. And this has bothered me all these years. I was an angel, and there was a little angel standing in front of me. I have no idea who the other children were other than my siblings, because I had 3. She was standing in front of me, and she had pigtails, and I remember one was flopping, so we were waiting to go out and do our presentation, and I straightened her pigtail, and the rubber band broke, and I got in a lot of trouble. That's my memory. Well, what happened at the YWCA was they kicked us out when they found out we weren't Christian. So I remember that, but I don't remember where we went unless that's when we moved to Lamarck. We owned property in Lamarck. I did not look any of this stuff up. I don't know where I'd even look. I think it was 1204 Ross Street, and Mom and Dad dragged us across the causeway every Sunday for years and years. We had a little building that I think now is a house, and it might have been just a little larger than the sanctuary, and then we had these little temporary buildings out back. We had a number of children then, and I'm sad to see that we don't have any children now except for the Stubbs girl. Anyway, she's a Stubb to me. So these are some of the people. If you look inside the cover of your hymnal, you'll see the names of people that were members in the past, and you'll see some of these names. There were 4 Baker children, and Lori and Nat Pepper had 2 children. We had, and Nat was a doctor and a lawyer. My dad was, of course, a lawyer and a judge. We had the Lees, they were both doctors, they had children. We had the Powells, he was a doctor, they had children. We had the Stubbs, he was a doctor, they had children. And we had the Zineldens, Ramsey still lives here a couple of blocks from me, and they had children. These are all I can remember off the top of my head. I'm really sad that we don't have any, and none of my siblings went on to maintain, their relationship with UU. Which I would say Unitarian because we didn't have UU when I was growing up. We were Unitarians. And it really got to me when people told me, no, years when I was growing up, you're a UU, you're a Unitarian Universalist. I don't even know what Universalist was, so how could I do that? But my sister became a Methodist. She went to Texas Wesleyan. They're all Methodists. My older brother went to the Naval Academy. He was an atheist, I think. He's deceased now, but he got married the second time in the UU church, I think it was in Houston. And my little brother totally never did anything, and he's deceased now too. So growing up, we had relatively few children. We didn't have the, LRY. We didn't have enough kids to have that. I can remember Nat Pepper teaching a Sunday school class at that. The day I remember was just me and my 3 siblings. But what we did is we learned about the Big Bang Theory and different religions. We did take field trips. I remember going to the synagogue. I had a friend who was Baptist, and I wanted to go to the Bible school in the summer. My mother's like, okay, go. So I went to Bible school for a week, came home, was like, what is all this stuff? Anyway, but it was fun. But it was what they call it, Vacation Bible School. Yeah, VBS. I dated Catholic boys. I didn't have a problem with that. We just sort of existed. My mother was a volunteer all over the island, and when my dad was in the legislature, she was a volunteer in Austin, but she never really spoke about it. They didn't tell us you need to volunteer or anything. My father was known as the poor man's lawyer because he represented so many poor people in Galveston. When he got elected as judge, there were people that came up to me and said, if I'd known he couldn't be a lawyer anymore, I wouldn't have voted for him because he represented them pretty much for free. We had, I would call it a Unitarian Bible. It was a big, thick thing. The dog chewed it up. But we held on it for years. I think after my parents died, I donated it someplace. I did look on Ancestry.com and 23andMe, and I'm actually a descendant of Jefferson somehow. Anyway, he's in the lineage. If I thought about all this thing with slavery, I wouldn't have admitted that to anyone. My sister said something in her bridge group. She's no longer an active Methodist, and in fact talked to me, she lives in Dickinson, about going up to the Bay Area, and I took her up there and showed her where it was. She's almost blind, so she could drive up there and back, I think. But she's in a bridge group, and she told some people there that she was Unitarian, and she was descended from Jefferson, and this lady said, "Oh, you're part black," and moved over. Well, that was the kind of thing that I faced growing up. All these other kids and had their youth groups, so they had lots of friends. And the Pepper girl, wait a minute, it's going to come to me. Nan was a year behind me. Jack was 2 years ahead of me, and I think most of these other children were younger than me because I know Ramsey because he's a lawyer, but well, he's way younger than me. So we really didn't have anybody to hang out with in school. And so when kids would talk about they were going to go to their church during the week to this something like LRY, I would go home and say, how come we don't have that? Well, because we don't have enough children. I have given a lot of thought to why we don't have children here, and I'm wondering, where are all the doctors and lawyers? Because that's the ones that we had. But I can only think that we haven't recruited them, and the people that grew up in this fellowship, for the most part, have moved away, except me and Ramsey. I brought my kids here, and they were some of the first kids here to be in that sex group, and they came home with a lot of questions. But otherwise, we just didn't have just a whole lot of education about what we were. We did sing some religious hymns. I remember that. And I remember when my youngest daughter went off to college, and she went through Rush, and her sorority were singing some hymns that she had never heard of, because I guess we'd quit singing them here by that time. So, and it was difficult for the girls too, because there were a few kids that were around their age group, but Susie was younger than some, which by then, of course, I'm much older, and older than the others, so she never fit in. And Tara was almost by herself. They babysat too with the little kids, because there were very few in their age group. And neither one of them have stayed Unitarians. Susie became a Baptist, and Tara goes to some non-denominational. Well, here's the interesting thing about my parents. My father was raised by an itinerant Baptist preacher, and I guess that's what scared him into being a Unitarian. And my mother was Church of England, and she didn't believe all that stuff either. So they got together and belonged here, and it was a good experience, but I have to say I was really lonely sometimes, as far as having a defined group to hang out with. And still, when I used to go to class reunions, because I don't go anymore, some of those people still congregate together, and I'm still not part of that, So I had more Jewish friends. Oh, we did have a number of, I don't know if they'd call themselves recovering Jews or not, but we had a number of Jewish people that belonged back then. The Levies, for example. They were very active. Well, Harry was, and I think Harry Jr. came here too. But Harry, the father he was a little feisty guy. They used to get into big arguments about stuff, so I remember him. So that's basically it. I mean, I'm sad that we don't recruit people with children here. We don't have an active kindergarten. Well, in fact, I'm leaving, so it doesn't really matter to me anymore. But that's something I would like to see this fellowship, work toward. Is you're all gonna age out, and then who's going to keep this fellowship going? Anyway, that's all I have. Yeah. I think it was in the 50s. When I was born in 49. I remember I was a little kid. 61? Well, yeah. I didn't know what the hell that was. I still don't.
Hi, I'm Mitch Philpott. I have a long and checkered career of religion. I grew up in Doraville, Georgia. And I started out as an Episcopalian, and it was one of those things where, my dad's parents were Episcopalian, so he was an Episcopalian. And but when we were in Atlanta, they joined a Great Books reading group, and what they found out was that many of those people, being they were artists and doctors and PhD chemists and very intelligent, very independent-minded people, and a lot of them were Unitarian. So back in the '64, I guess, when we moved from Georgia to Texas, they discovered the Unitarian Fellowship in Houston, and we started going there when I was like in 8th grade. So that's when I started being a Unitarian, and we just really fit right in. In Georgia, we went to the Episcopal church, and it was very, Episcopal, And the other church I went to was my grandmother's Baptist church in Norcross, Georgia. And those were the ones that, for the first couple of years, they didn't have indoor plumbing, when that's how rural it was. And they had the fans, with the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus on them, that kind of Baptist church. And yeah, and women were not allowed to speak in church and all that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, and so when I got to Houston, we joined the Unitarian Church, and I was a member of the LRY, and we had a large LRY group. We had summer camps every summer, and it was a large part of my upbringing when I was in high school. That was the late '60s, so it was an exciting time to say the least. We're also known as the licentious rebellious youth, but we had a great time at the summer camps. They were very, very progressive. We talked about, homosexuality, which was, back in the '60s. Oh, that was like, quit, get in your closet, and had a lot of fun. And I'm still friends with a lot of those people. About 10 years ago, we had like a reunion of that LRY group. About 20 people got together. So it was a big part of my upbringing. And so we went there for a while. Then I moved downtown Houston. I went to the First Church for a while, and then made the mistake of meeting my first wife. And got married. And what was kind of funny there was she wanted to get married in the Methodist Church there in Memorial, where her mother got married. And so I said, okay, but I want our minister at First Church, where I was going when I lived in Houston, was Webb Kitchell, and he was great. He was a wonderful guy. So I said, I want him to do part of the service. Well, to put it mildly, what the minister of the Methodist said and what Webb Kitchell said were a bit different. And but I really liked him. He once told a story of he said where somebody came to him and said, I'm upset, and you don't promise me salvation and give me all that stuff. And he said, yeah. So now a lot of churches, they hand out life preservers. In this church, we teach people how to swim. So I really like that. I also met a guy when I was in Austin going to college, getting married by a Unitarian minister. And he went to the ministry and said, well, I'm pretty much an atheist, and my wife's kind of agnostic. And so the minister looked at him and said, oh, so you want me to leave out all that God stuff? He said, somebody would say, God stuff. So then, I moved here and joined this. And what was funny, when I came to this fellowship, it was just a lot like the fellowship that I grew up in. It was just, I felt right at home. And and I'm reading this book. This is Stephen Jay Gould. It's about science and religion, but I ran across this one quote that kind of struck me as why I like this religion. It says, it's from T.H. Huxley. It said, a deep sense of religion is compatible with the entire absence of theology. And that was one of the things I found, is that you could be a theist, you could be a Christian, but you didn't have to buy into all that absurd, conservative theology, which I never could understand. I actually, unlike a lot of Christians, I've actually read the Bible, and you wouldn't believe how many things aren't in there, or how many contradictions they are. And when you try to point these things out to those people, they just like, and you know, ugh. So, and after a while, I actually could not figure out how did they get their religion from that book. It's just insane. I've really enjoyed growing up here. I've really enjoyed the Chalice Circle. I consider it my spiritual exercise class, and working with the people here. And my brother, who started out as a Unitarian, has now gone back to being a Unitarian. He's going to the Unitarian Fellowship that we grew up in there in Houston. So he's a member of that now. So it's carrying on, and so I just I really have felt that it's been a huge boon to my spiritual growth, and I really appreciate you people in all this place. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Shauna, and I grew up in the First Unitarian Church in Houston from infancy to adolescence when I drifted away. So most of my comments are pretty much from a child's perspective. I would say that the pros of that era were being surrounded by families that were very progressive and activist in the community. We kids always accompanied our parents on volunteer activities, so we felt like we belonged. The cons lay principally in the religious education arena, which all have heard now. I really didn't know what Unitarians believed. There were no principles tagged up on the wall at that time for us to contemplate. We learned about the Kung of the Kalahari and the Navajo in Sunday school, and that did open our eyes to appreciate other cultures, but spiritual and historical topics were absent. It left us without any references to art, literature, and other religions. It made me very insecure among my peers and my extended family. I hope that has changed since the 60s. When we moved to Galveston 4 years ago, we decided to explore this fellowship. I'm so glad we did. We have met many wonderful people and enjoy being part of this welcoming community. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Marie Kennemer, formerly a Trice from birth. I'm a Texas Women's graduate, 2009. I had 3 other college degrees, so we just throw it under the bus. I'm kind of one of those seekers and shakers and movers. So I grew up, born into a Unitarian church, First Jefferson on Purington Avenue in Fort Worth. And then there's a lot of histrionics. I love what you shared, and I am going to speak from my perspective. I can write the philosophies, the principles, and what I saw and observed. It got into a fight over gay philosophies, and I always liked the AA thing called a resentment and a coffee pot. So the two church, they split into two. One became the West Side UU off of Hemphill, and then the other one became the First Jefferson on Sandy Lane. And Walter Beasley kind of floated over there because he was gay. I was raised babysitting by Bob and Walter. Didn't have any idea what gender meant, and nor color, other than you were just tan or maybe a little yellow if you were Asian. And then here we go into now our church is All Peoples. They've changed the name again. And I'm learning now we're going to be adding a debate over principles and maybe changing the name from principles to values. So these are the upper higher echelons. I am nobody but a young little girl that grew up on the floor being drugged to the church and saw Sunday school, learning about Egypt, Darwinism. I was like, Mom, what's the monkeys? Were we monkeys? And what's this? And and art, pottery, painting, and farming. I learned these in Sunday school. And then I was exposed somewhere where it started catching on in elementary school that the Easter Bunny was the resurrection of Christ, and that Santa Claus was not Santa Claus, it was Jesus' birth. And I was made fun of because I was the dumb little girl that knew only the Easter Bunny. And then my parents started setting me down. And then I had also been hit by a car when I was age 7. And so I started having a different, not fitting in, but I'm good. I'm a survivor. And I grew up with the people around the wall, Jefferson and all that, and representing what our creed, isn't a creed, it's a covenant of love, self-love and love others. And that's what I knew, really I do. And then I'll give you a little history. My father was a federal agent, Foreign Legion, Air Force, and he actually became a part of this doctrine to be a spy for communism, believe it or not, for hiding in during the 60s. So I found that histrionics later in life from my dad. And my dad, believe it or not, brought me down here when I was 14 to show me the world, kind of give a little pep talk on sexuality, gay, everything in the ocean, and brought me here if I, just kind of visited and fishing in the world. And I've learned about the other religions, and my father always gave me this perspective. What is this covenant? It is about philosophy. Always ask and seek why. Why? And be open-minded to other religious beliefs. Don't be judgmental, but I have always bowed through the judgment of, got a couple of girlfriends, 2 of them, and we're still having debates. I sent a picture going, I'm a member of a Unitarian church in Galveston, and I'm going to get burned. I'm going to be roasted today, but it's okay. And what I learned as a Texas Women's graduate, equality for all. I want everybody to, that's what I grew up with. And they were, my mother was an activist for women's rights, Roe versus Wade. I got to go through that, and I called them the crow parties, the women cackling over this and women's rights. And so as a feminist at Texas Women's University, I really debated that platform. Now my values have changed a little bit, but and then my father was a civil rights activist, and I did get involved with the Jim Crow thing, and so I know I have a 100-year-old member from the first Jefferson and Wellington Martin, and when he passes, there's a picture of me and him hugging, and he's got his head up against me because he can remember me when we wore plastic pants with cloth diapers and these horrible safety pins, and me in my frilly little panties, and he could, catch me because he was long, tall. And there's a lot of fond memories of watching all my elders age out, but I think on the Zoom they put up a picture of the little wooden carving that came from the first Jefferson on Purington and went, and there was a fight over who got it on west side and east side, and that is the altar archway, and that was a representation of my brother and I. They just took children, and it really, if you went into the front of it, it's a hollow face. There's no faces on us. It's just the back side of 2 children, and that was the creed for us, our doctrine is to have children coming into a new archway, putting these, I guess, religious beliefs. I didn't grow up with religious beliefs. It is about love and community. Is it there? Yeah. So that was, believe it or not, done by some famous artist. No one actually knows anymore who did what, because paperworks and stuff and fighting and stuff. But it is kind of the representation of just two children walking through the archway to freedom to love. So I can't make y'all laugh and everything. It's about love as our covenant that I do dwell. I grew up with learning about witchcraft, astrology, and my father just said, if you don't understand something, go to that religion, go research it, go join, just be a part of it. The thing I still kind of find nitpicky is people judging me that I'm going to burn in hell, and then my little philosophy about UFOs. So now I'm really taking the creed. I'm willing to stand up there headstrong against it and say, this is what I believe in. This is who I am. And if you don't like it, the door's that way, and I walk this way. Anyway, thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you.